Queen Camilla's summer getaways were always written off as quiet, private retreats. She would slip away to that same countryside estate completely alone, leaving both her family and staff behind. She kept her exact location a total secret, and nobody questioned the mystery until King Charles decided to pay an unannounced visit to the estate himself. What the King and Prince William discovered hidden behind those closed doors sent massive shockwaves through the entire royal family. What was actually happening inside that highly secretive country villa? And how exactly did this discovery push the British monarchy to the very brink of collapse? Stay with us as we uncover the unsettling truth behind Queen Camilla's hidden holidays. Let's closely examine Queen Camilla's secret holidays. Every single summer, while the rest of the royal family travelled the globe for their standard vacations, Camilla would quietly slip away to a secluded villa tucked deep within the English countryside. She never missed a single year. The schedule was always identical, her destination never changed, and the intense secrecy around the trip grew tighter with each passing season. No official press release ever mentioned her travel plans, and the palace media team had learned long ago to completely omit her from the official royal holiday schedule. This had become her ultimate private ritual, a quiet getaway that seemed totally harmless initially, but soon started attracting far more attention than she ever expected. The bizarre truth behind her annual routine will completely shatter everything you thought you knew about her. But before we get to that shocking revelation, let's look at the estate itself. The main villa sits hidden behind massive hedges and endless manicured gardens, protected by an ancient stone wall that kept the public far away. Local residents called it the Silent House because absolutely no sound ever escaped. There was no music, no laughter, and not even the faint murmur of working staff. Even the local birds avoided the property. Nearby neighbours almost never saw her arrive or leave. A convoy of blacked-out vehicles would quietly arrive early one morning and vanish 2 weeks later. During those 2 weeks, the entire estate went completely off the grid. All phones were locked up and deliveries were completely banned. I mean, the isolation was intense, you know. No one, not even King Charles or Prince William, could contact her directly. At first, royal insiders assumed it was simply Camilla's extreme way of relaxing. Over the years, however, this annual retreat started to look like a dark obsession. Palace sources claimed Charles tried to accompany her early in their marriage. Surprisingly, she rejected his offer politely, but very firmly claiming she desperately needed quiet time to think. That excuse became her shield whenever the subject arose again. Prince William never chose to press the matter, though he found it incredibly bizarre that she wanted to isolate herself, especially since the family always valued togetherness during holidays. Her strict refusal to let anyone, whether it was family, close friends, or even her personal staff, tag along transformed what should have been a normal vacation into one of the most talked-about scandalous mysteries within the entire royal circle. The entire royal staff understood the golden rule. Her summer getaways were never to be questioned. Those strict orders came straight from her private secretary's office. Every butler, driver, and housekeeper assigned to the trip had to sign incredibly strict non-disclosure agreements, forbidding them from sharing even the smallest detail. It felt as if she had simply vanished into an entirely different universe, one running parallel to the crown, but completely disconnected from it. The rare staff members who worked the estate during her visits described an incredibly tense and quiet atmosphere. Every single chore was executed flawlessly, every surface was spotless, and every curtain hung symmetrically. There was no tolerance for error and absolutely no room for casual talk. Keep watching, because this is where the story gets truly bizarre. Outside the palace, the media grew suspicious. Every year, massive tabloids like the Daily Mail and Mirror published speculative pieces about her disappearances. These reports labelled the Queen's summer trips as mysterious escapes, with some insiders claiming she was secretly consulting with spiritual healers or private advisors. Other sources whispered that she was drafting a secret tell-all memoir or even running a shadow influence network completely separate from the monarchy. Eager paparazzi tried following her motorcade, but they always lost her trail long before reaching the rural estate. The handful of blurry photos that did leak showed nothing but a locked security gate and a faint shadow in a window. Even worse, there were 0 insider leaks. In an era where royal family scandals leaked to the tabloids in mere minutes, Camilla's hidden world stayed totally secure. The villa's entire daily operation was fueled by paranoia, with staff ordered to communicate solely using handwritten notes pushed under doors. Her dinners were prepared under incredibly strict guidelines and quietly left outside her bedroom door without a single spoken word. No one entered the main house without direct clearance from her private security chief. Even official letters from King Charles were heavily screened and dropped off by a courier who never once saw her face. These rules were so incredibly severe that when a junior gardener once tried to take a quick photo of the grounds, he was fired that very evening and immediately replaced by a worker from a different county. Nobody dared ask why, but there is an even bigger secret most people completely miss. You see, the security system protecting the estate was insanely high-tech for a private home. Local security experts estimate the entire setup cost over £300,000 to install, boasting advanced motion sensors, underground pressure plates, and high-definition cameras hidden right inside the outdoor garden lanterns. Elite guards rotated every 6 hours, keeping up active surveillance, even when the massive estate looked completely deserted. Heavy checkpoints lined the long private driveway, and every single car was thoroughly searched before entering, even if it carried approved royal staff members. When you really look at it, what shocked royal insiders the most was that absolutely nobody, not even the highest-ranking palace officials, could access that security footage without getting Camilla's direct written permission. The few visitors who stepped inside the villa during her getaways described the interior vibe as both flawless and deeply unnatural. Every single room was perfectly symmetrical, with curtains drawn halfway to let in soft light, but never enough to peer outside. Fresh white roses were replaced daily. The rooms smelled faintly of lavender and something sterile like preserved air from a closed museum. The floors were buffed to a mirror shine, and not a single book or photo frame was ever out of place. Rare visitors left deeply unsettled because the entire property felt too clean, too quiet, and completely staged. Camilla's personal habits during these secret retreats only added to the mystery. She would sit for hours reading in the gardens, but almost never turned a page. On certain mornings, she would take long solitary walks around the grounds at dawn, whispering quietly to herself the entire time. On other days, she remained locked inside for hours with the drapes pulled shut. The only sound was faint pacing from room to room, while staff occasionally heard quiet whispering behind closed doors. Well, no, it was really just about being around the police, but they never asked any questions. Her meals were always light and basic, mostly soups and hot tea with 0 requests for entertainment. The villa slowly transformed into a world built entirely around her silence. Over time, the estate itself became a strange symbol of royal secrecy. Whenever her name popped up in conversation, senior aides and close family members would quietly exchange very knowing, uneasy glances. New younger staff joining the palace service received strict warnings never to ask about the property. Rumours spread anyway, some totally harmless, others deeply unsettling. People whispered that the walls of this particular villa held more dark secrets than any other royal property. It quickly became a legendary metaphor among journalists and palace insiders. Whenever someone said she had gone to the villa, it never meant a simple holiday. It meant disappearing into absolute mystery. Within the royal circle, curiosity slowly morphed into deep unease. Charles respected her privacy, yet he couldn't help but wonder what kept drawing her back. William also found it highly suspicious that her staff rotated yearly, as if she feared anyone returning twice. He is definitely the cheeky one. While they look incredibly alike, it seems their actual personalities could not be more different from one another. The Queen's former personal dresser once whispered that the villa's expensive furniture had been completely replaced 3 times in 10 years, yet nobody could explain why. It seemed as if she wanted to wipe away every single trace of her presence after each stay. As years slipped by, the pattern remained. Every summer, Camilla would vanish into that stone-walled estate, completely shielded from cameras, and questions returning 2 weeks later looking physically refreshed but emotionally distant. Whatever secrets she chased within those stone walls stayed locked inside with her. Slowly this place stopped feeling like a peaceful private retreat. It felt like a scandal waiting to explode. Soon enough, that dark secret would force its way into the light during a routine royal property inspection that shattered everything the family believed they knew about her. Things are about to get wild. Keep watching for King Charles's shocking discovery. When King Charles decided to conduct a highly private, unannounced inspection of all royal properties, it was supposed to be a basic routine walkthrough. The king took a deep personal interest in ensuring every single estate was perfectly secure, especially with growing angry questions rising in Parliament regarding overall royal spending. Dozens of historic properties lay scattered across the country from Balmoral to Sandringham. Yet one specific location grabbed his attention, the highly secluded quiet countryside villa, where Camilla escaped every single summer. It had actually been years since he last visited the property. Since she was currently away on her typical trip abroad, he figured it was the absolute perfect opportunity to take a look around. William quickly agreed to tag along. He was fueled partly by curiosity and partly because the villa's lingering unspoken mystery had always felt deeply unsettling to him. Their journey was kept strictly off the record. There were absolutely no aggressive photographers, no trailing staff cars, and 0 official announcements regarding the brief trip. They slipped away with just 2 trusted aides in a very discreet black Range Rover, leaving Windsor Castle at dawn long before the public noticed anything. The winding roads were completely empty, blanketed in cold frost and thick mist. As they neared the estate, the atmosphere grew heavy, and even William felt a strange tension building. It was supposed to be a routine check, but nothing about this sudden trip felt ordinary. Everything seemed completely normal right up until the moment it wasn't. When they finally reached the massive front gates, the security guards looked visibly shaken. The monarch rarely ever made completely unannounced appearances like this, especially when it came to Camilla's highly guarded private countryside residence. Even so, they quickly swung the heavy iron gates open and the small vehicle rolled onto the long tree-lined driveway. The villa slowly emerged through the creeping fog, tall, silent, and far too perfect. The lawns were flawlessly manicured, the gravel path freshly raked, yet there was a deeply unsettling, eerie emptiness to the whole estate. The air felt incredibly heavy, as if every sound had been swallowed whole. Charles noticed right away that there weren't any birds on the property, not even a single crow or sparrow. Even for the dead of winter, it was highly unusual. The nervous butler stationed there since her last visit greeted them with visible anxiety. He explained that absolutely everything had been kept exactly as Camilla left it following her strict standing orders. As Charles walked through the grand entrance hall, his shoes loudly clicking against the marble floor, William lingered behind, intensely scanning the furniture and perfectly arranged vases. The entire house looked like it had been scrubbed just minutes ago. The carpets were brand new, the polished silverware shone without a single smudge, and the air smelled faintly of sweet lavender and harsh disinfectant. The windows were spotless, the heavy drapes perfectly pleated, and the brick fireplace looked completely unused. Here is where things start to get incredibly strange. She loved Welsh mountain ponies and recalled a massive nearby horse exhibition known as the Ditchling Horse Show. Pausing in the sitting room, Charles noticed something incredibly odd. The vintage grandfather clock by the wall had stopped at precisely midnight. Although the piano nearby had its cover on the keys underneath, had been polished to a shine, looking as though someone had been playing them not long ago. Over in the corner stood a single chair facing the wall, slightly out of line with the rest of the furniture. The king felt a sudden cold chill. Quietly walking behind him, William remarked that this didn't feel like an empty house at all. It felt like it was waiting for someone. As they went deeper inside, the flawless perfection of the villa became almost suffocating. Every object looked staged like a museum exhibit. In the dining room, 12 pristine crystal glasses sat perfectly arranged on the table, even though Camilla always dined completely alone during her visits. Inside the study, neat piles of letters sat totally untouched beside a single feather pen. A fresh bouquet of white roses rested in the exact same vase, noted in palace records 5 years earlier. It seemed as though time itself had frozen within these walls, every single detail frozen in place. Here is what most people don't know behind closed doors. Charles's personal security team had previously raised quite serious concerns regarding the villa's highly unusual upkeep. According to palace insiders, utility records showed highly fluctuating power usage even during months when the house was supposed to be empty. On top of that, a hired maintenance contractor once reported hearing faint classical music playing inside during the off-season. Those odd details were quickly brushed aside as computer glitches or simple misunderstandings. But now, standing there in person, both Charles and William could sense something deeply unsettling hiding beneath the surface. They stepped into the library next a long, narrow room packed with heavy oak shelves and thick red drapes. It should have felt comforting, but it definitely didn't. William immediately noticed a few books pulled slightly out of place and some loose papers scattered all across the writing desk. Every single page was turned face down. The ink had faded on several sheets, suggesting they had been lying there for months. On one corner of the desk, a stack of old photographs sat upside down, their edges curling with age. Charles hesitated before even touching them. Something about the room felt intensely private, almost sacred, as though it held secrets no one was ever meant to disturb. None of it made sense until they took a much closer look. Scanning the wooden shelves, William spotted faint, strange markings on the wall hidden behind a portrait. They were tiny, almost invisible scratches that seemed to form letters or initials. Leaning closer, he realized they spelled out an incomplete word, as if someone had suddenly stopped writing midway. Instantly, the air in the room grew much colder. Charles flipped one of the papers over and discovered a half-written note. The handwriting was unmistakably Camilla's, but the scribbled words were incredibly cryptic and harsh. It spoke of something being kept hidden until the right moment, followed by a name scratched out so violently that the paper itself tore. William turned the photos upright and froze. They were all pictures of Princess Diana. Some were from public appearances, others deeply private, likely taken by photographers who never actually released them. Every single photo had scribbled notes in the margins, circled faces, and highlighted details. This was definitely no ordinary collection. It looked like a detailed study, or maybe even active surveillance. The dark realization shocked him. Charles said nothing, but the tension between father and son was heavy. The air in there felt almost too heavy to breathe. Leaving the library in silence, they walked toward the master bedroom down a corridor lined with framed art and scented candles. Even though none of the candles had been lit, their footsteps echoed softly through the hallway, making the only sound in the massive house. The deeper they went, the colder the air became, as if the walls themselves warned them to turn back. Charles hesitated at the door. The handle was shiny and a faint scent of perfume drifted from the room. He turned it slowly with a trembling hand. What they discovered next will leave you absolutely speechless. At first glance, the room inside looked completely perfect. An immaculate bedspread, sunlight filtering through soft white curtains, and a dressing table neatly arranged with brushes, jewellery, and perfume. But beneath that flawless surface lay something that deeply unsettled them both. A drawer left slightly ajar revealed old envelopes marked with dates that perfectly matched Diana's major public appearances years earlier. On the dresser sat a small box packed with old press clippings, all focusing on the late princess. Some had their headlines crossed out in dark ink, while others had angry comments scribbled in the margins. They even found a folded napkin from a charity gala where Diana had once appeared, pressed flat like some bizarre historical artifact. Charles stepped back, visibly shaken by it all. He had only expected a simple inspection, but instead discovered a disturbing shrine that felt both intimate and obsessive. William's eyes scanned the room, absorbing every single detail. His heavy silence said far more than actual words ever could. Both of them knew this was no ordinary royal retreat. This was something else entirely. They stood there frozen for a long time, neither of them moving or speaking. The house, always described as her peaceful sanctuary, now felt like a dark chamber of secrets, waiting for them to uncover it. And that is when everything changed. The rest of their inspection was brief. They quietly stepped out of the bedroom and made their way outside, both lost in heavy thoughts. The thick silence that followed them back down the hallway felt far heavier than when they first arrived. Outside, the air felt sharper and colder, as if their world had shifted. The grand villa no longer looked peaceful. It looked haunted, driven by some dark purpose. Neither of them mentioned what they'd found. Not yet. But deep down, they both clearly understood that this shocking discovery was only the beginning, and whatever dark truth lay ahead would shake the foundations of the monarchy itself. Queen Camilla's secret obsession. This master bedroom felt far more suspicious than the rest of the villa. It wasn't just the uneasy feeling caused by the silence, but something far colder, something that forced both Charles and William to freeze at the doorway without speaking. Stepping further into the dim room, William's eyes immediately caught the first photograph hanging on the far wall, and his breath froze instantly as he stared at it. There was Princess Diana smiling warmly in one of her most iconic photos, but the beautiful image had been viciously defaced. Thick red markings were slashed directly across her eyes with angry words scribbled beneath in Camilla's unmistakable handwriting. This wall wasn't adorned with family portraits or royal memories. It was covered almost from floor to ceiling with pictures of Diana, every single one altered, crossed out, or written over with highly unsettling messages. What had once been a quiet, private retreat now felt like the inside of someone's deeply disturbed mind. The deeper they looked, the worse it got. Every single inch of this room told a story of bitter resentment that had built up for years. Several photographs were torn clean in half, while others had hostile words like fraud or enemy scribbled crudely across them. On the writing desk sat a neat stack of old newspaper clippings from the 90s, all detailing Diana's public appearances and her massive growing popularity. The white margins were filled with notes, small, angry lines, penned in Camilla's neat but sharp handwriting. This was no longer just the tone of a bitter rivalry. It was pure obsession, the dark kind that slowly consumes and distorts everything around it. And then came the moment that completely shattered them both. Tucked under a framed photo of the tragic Paris crash lay a slip of paper with the chilling words, "Finally, she is out of the way." Written in that exact same ink, it turned the room into something utterly unbearable. William's knees went completely weak as he stared down at it. For a few agonizing seconds, the silence became absolutely suffocating. His shock quickly gave way to nausea, deep grief, and then a sudden wave of anger with no outlet. Charles stood frozen, his face pale and his fingers trembling as he reached for the nearest table to steady himself. But what they uncovered next shocked everyone. Behind the heavy wardrobe, half hidden by an ornate curtain, they found a detailed map pinned right to the wall. It was a detailed tracking map of Diana's past movements, including London, Paris, and New York. Each location was marked with notes and dates matching events from decades earlier. This wasn't the sort of thing anyone stumbles upon by accident. It was deliberate, deeply studied, and highly methodical. Tiny labels like charity dinner, hospital visit, and meeting with designer showed a level of meticulous tracking that was simply too detailed to be just a coincidence. It looked as though someone had been tracking her life long after she passed away. Right beside the map was a tiny chest packed with unsigned letters, all written by the exact same hand. Every single line dripped with absolute venom. bitter criticisms, deep jealousy and resentment, all pointing straight back to the same woman. Prince William hesitated before picking one up, but once he did, the chaotic sentences read like the messy fragments of an unravelling mind. None of it made any sense. Each word was drenched in pure hatred, yet structured with the eerie discipline of someone who had bottled it up for years. Moving closer to the bed, the air grew noticeably colder. Private photographs of Princess Diana in her happiest moments, smiling warmly with her young sons, while attending charity events, were pinned on corkboards with harsh scribbles, as if someone was rewriting history, showing a dark obsession that was never just a passing phase. Its roots were incredibly deep and tangled. It revealed a bitterness that outlived its origin, slowly turning into a dark daily ritual. King Charles realized this was no longer about simple jealousy. This was about total control, trying to erase someone who refused to fade away even in death. There was a drawer in the bedside table, locked but slightly ajar. William pried it open, finding even more photos, older shots that were clearly reprinted. Now they fully understood why Camilla had always kept this villa completely off limits, why no staff ever stayed longer than one season, why her private retreats followed the exact same secret pattern. What had once looked like peaceful solitude was actually an annual ritual, a quiet return to a private world, fueled entirely by deep resentment. Without saying a single word, they both knew they had to get back to the palace immediately. Too many questions needed answers, and years of silence finally made sense. But as their car sped away from the isolated villa, both men knew that whatever they had just uncovered was not the end. It was just the start of something far darker. The shocking news of what King Charles and Prince William found inside that villa could not stay buried for very long. Within hours of their return to the palace, King Charles called an emergency meeting behind tightly closed doors. Only his most trusted advisors were allowed inside, and even they could see the sheer shock on his face. This devastating discovery was not just a deeply personal betrayal. It posed a direct threat to the fragile public image of the British monarchy itself. Every single word spoken inside that room carried the heavy weight of centuries of royal reputation. What started as a private conversation quickly dissolved into utter chaos. Tense advisors argued over damage control while palace staff whispered nervously in the corridors. Some insisted this truth must never reach the public, warning that the royal family could not survive another massive scandal. Others urged honesty, warning that secrecy would only make things worse once the media inevitably uncovered the truth. King Charles listened in silence, but deep down his mind was already made up. He could not simply pretend that what he witnessed inside that villa did not exist. While the palace scrambled to contain the situation, Camilla was already travelling back from her retreat, completely unaware that her secret world had been exposed to the light. She expected the usual quiet silence to greet her return. Instead, she walked straight into a raging storm. Charles and William were waiting with all the evidence laid out before them, photos, letters, and maps. The tense confrontation began in a heavy silence, and when King Charles finally spoke, the tremor in his voice carried far more disappointment than anger. Camilla tried to brush it off at first, claiming it was all a big misunderstanding. She described the room as simple research, arguing she was just studying the public obsession with Diana. But when Prince William demanded real answers about those hateful messages and obsessive notes, her royal composure cracked. Her tone turned defensive and freezing cold, as if this disturbing shrine was just some private coping mechanism. Her weak explanation failed to convince either of them. What hurt King Charles most was not the shrine itself, but her total lack of remorse. There was no guilt in her eyes, only irritation. Prince William's fury filled the room. The horrifying image of his mother's defaced photos simply would not leave his mind. Their confrontation ended in a silence so heavy it felt completely final. Within days, an anonymous leak reached the press, spreading globally almost overnight. Major tabloids from London to New York ran shocking headlines that rocked the royal family. cruel images of Diana's defaced portraits and tracking maps began circulating all over the internet. The palace quickly issued denials, calling the reports highly distorted fabrications, but crucial public trust was already rapidly slipping away. Social media exploded with massive outrage, reopening deep, painful wounds worldwide. Thank you for watching. What are your thoughts on Camilla's shocking actions? Be sure to share your opinions in the comments below. If you enjoyed this video, please like, share and subscribe. Tap the next video on your screen to keep watching.